why you weren't in the scene. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown here on the Let's Get Ready Network. I'm Adelia. That's my buddy Josh. And it's time for the free for all episode. I'm actually surprised that we haven't done one of these yet.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to talk about the free for all because it's definitely one of the most important things within the Schmoedown history. And it's a very unique thing within the Schmoedown history. So this will be probably an in-depth episode. We got a lot to talk about. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too. So, where do you want to start, Josh?
Let's start with the free for all format because the free for all worked very differently than normal Schmoedown matches. And for if you've somehow found this podcast without knowing what the Schmoedown free for all is, I guess this is the point to enlighten you. The Schmoedown free for all was a way for almost 1v1v1v1 28 or 38 times, which later went up to be 50 times, where
Yeah.
50 players would get in the ring and go against each other. Now, you can't have them all go out at the same time, but what they would do is you get 5 questions. 5 people would come out and get 5 questions. Whoever gets the lowest amount gets eliminated. If multiple people get the lowest amount, then they get eliminated. If they are all tied, then there's sudden death, and there's a sudden death until there's someone who can be eliminated, where someone gets it wrong and someone gets it right. If I remember correctly, I don't know much about wrestling. Wrestling's one of my media blind spots, if you will. But I believe there's an event this is very similar to, as the Schmoedown in a lot of ways
Yes.
is based off of wrestling.
Yeah, the Royal Rumble in WWE, they have wrestlers enter one by one, and then whoever's the last one standing, because they get eliminated by being thrown over the top rope. So whoever's the last one standing wins the Royal Rumble and generally gets a title shot at WrestleMania, which is basically what winning the free for all did. You win the free for all, you got a title shot.
Absolutely. And so, what really like about this format, it's interesting because the most similar comparison format wise is the Iron Man match. And
Hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the Iron Man matches. Some of them were historic and awesome, but some of them were
Some of them
underwhelming.
were not good.
And that's because of the lack of strategy. And when I was thinking about the free for all episode, I wonder, why does the free for all not suffer from any of the same flaws that the Iron Man suffers from? I think there's a couple things that come into play. The first one is the pure magnitude of the fact that it's like, the fact that it's 50 different competitors going
Hmm.
all against each other instead of one match. The fact that it's honestly, I think one of its greatest strengths is how long it was, in a
Yeah.
way, where it was like this own unique event, where I think if we got multiple free for alls, it would be brutal, it'd be too much. I think we'd get sick of it. But the fact we get one a year, it's so impactful because you get a free title shot, which, by the way, you can use at any point for any division. And the fact that it was such while the Iron Man like was a good format, it was just one match of knowledge. The fact that winning a free for all felt different in the sense of knowledge. That, like, oh, you have to survive multiple rounds or get really lucky by
Hmm.
getting a later number. What's it called? Winning a free for all usually means at least surviving 2 to 3 rounds, and that is like, you have to have a really good base of knowledge, and it just felt like very impressive. And I think there's a reason why, when we talk about the greatest Schmoedown players of all time, 2 of the 3 that are normally mentioned will have won a free for all. And we'll get into the specifics. We'll go over each free for all, some historic moments, and stuff like that. And the history that comes with it. But I think this was such an event that you always look forward to and could like drastically change not only a season but a career. I think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but one of the careers that it changed was Brendan Myers, the kid.
Yes.
And he talked about it, I remember, in an interview about like going into that free for all. He was 0-1. He just lost to Paul Yama. There wasn't a lot of talk or like buzz around him, about him getting more matches. He was going to get more matches, but like, it's tough to get over in the Schmoedown, especially when you lose your first match. And
Hmm.
by doing well in the free for all, so much opportunity was opened up for Brendan Meyer. And by winning or doing well in the free for all, there's so much fan excitement. I remember Frank Morgan was someone who did really well in the free for all, and a lot of people got excited for him in the draft or in Shimoda matches just because of doing well in the free for all. By doing well in
Mhm.
this event, you can kind of like put yourself in a mini way, put yourself over, get an initial amount of excitement because you show, oh, this person has maybe a championship level of knowledge or potential, and with more matches, it's a good way for players who haven't played a lot, if they can do a good showing, to get a lot of excitement around them.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, the first free for all when Andreyko cleared the table. That was the first time I really was, like, noticing how good Mark Andreyko was, and, like, a big moment, there were lots of big moments. John Humphrey was really good in the first free for all. Now, he didn't turn out to have a stellar singles career or anything like that, but, it showed that sometimes the knowledge when given specific categories isn't right, but the thing I liked about the free for all is there's no categories given, so it's just a general knowledge free for all, and you got to see some of these players really shine because of it.
Absolutely, and let's use that transition to go into the first free for all. Now,
Okay.
I think it's impossible to talk about the first free for all without going with the famous moment where Andreyko clears the table. I
Yeah.
think this moment does so well. It almost like we talk about putting players over. I think this moment puts the free for all over because seeing that moment where the table is cleared, and not only is the table is cleared with legends are at the table. McWeeny, Roca, Merle, all
Yeah,
at the
it's
table.
it's a murderer's row on that table, and Andreyko knocked them all out.
And Drago knocked them all out, and he knocked them all out by going perfect. And not only did he knock them out by going perfect, into that last question, they were all perfect, and one by one, you see
Mhm.
all of them give slightly different answers or incorrect. I don't remember if they had the same answers or different answers, but Draco was the one that was different, and
Yeah.
Draco was the only one who got it correct. And that moment is so famous and so good at putting the free for all moment, because by for that happening in the first ever free for all, in all future free for alls, we're always looking for that next moment, for that next time someone clears the table, for that next moment that at least it may never live up to that first time you see the XX5XX, but if it can get close. And there's certain moments where it's like as you're watching the free for all, you just feel that excitement of, oh, is this going to be a table clear? And like a lot of the first free for all sets the stage of like, oh man, I don't know who John Humphrey is, but he came out of nowhere and did really well, and that also set the stage for other competitors who do really well in the free for all
Mhm.
to get a lot of excitement. You start to wonder, oh, who's going to be the surprise person that we don't know about that does really well in the next free for all? There was just so much building blocks that was built from this first free for all.
Absolutely. Um, I mean, Andreyko's moment is so infamous in the Schmoedown lore that they made a T-shirt out of it that just said XX5XX, and everybody who watched the Schmoedown knew what that meant. Um, so that was a great way, I think, to kick off the free for all as an event in the Schmoedown. And we got to talk about the ending of the free for all, the first free for all, where Sam Levine is the last one standing with Tom Dagnino. And I just remember about that is Dagnino gave some like absolutely crazy answer to whatever the final question was. And Sam turns his board around and says, "Idiocracy," which is what's happening right now. And Sam wins the free for all. He then used his title shot to challenge Dan Murrell at was it at Collision? I
It
think
was
or
I, it was one I don't I'm trying to remember the exact match. What I remember was Dan Murrell just finished either getting the belt back or defending, and he
yeah.
immediately had to defend again. It was like a
Yeah.
back to back.
I want to say that's at Collision. I don't think it was spectacular. Maybe it was though. I don't remember. But Levine challenged Dan Murrell and lost. And that was really impressive from Dan at that point. Um yeah. So it was a great way to sort of like set the stage for like what the free for all could be.
Absolutely. And I think it's like I mean, if Dagnino wins, I'm not saying the free for all is lesser in a way. Well, maybe I am a little. What I'm going to say is that like if Dagnino came in at 50 and was able to win the free for all, there would be a bit of disappointment where we had so many great moments, so many great competitors lasting, and then Dagnino, who 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 I Dagnino's a great manager. I mean this statement with no disrespect. He's not a serious competitor. See a
No.
non-serious competitor come in at 50 and win would be a little disappointing, honestly, or a bit of a letdown. So I'm so glad Sam won there. And also, a really interesting thing about that, another thing that set a great building block with this first free for all, the fact that Sam Levine challenges Dan right after a title match. The
Mhm.
reason why I think that's so important is now anytime someone won a free for all, everyone was theorizing, "Oh man, is after this title match, are we getting another title match?" Like it could happen at any point. Is by Sam doing it immediately after another title match, it set the precedent that like, oh, this can happen at any point. We can see a title match, and then as soon as it's over, someone's coming in with that free for all slot and challenging a competitor that might be a little tired or be mentally exhausted.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I just wish we'd seen a challenge like that again. I don't think we did. I think we had, the challenges for the winners of the free for all known in advance, and then they hyped up the match and everything after this. This was the one that was a true surprise cash in, and I wish they'd done that a little bit more, honestly.
I think so too. I think the reasoning why is my guess is just scheduling. It's
Mhm.
probably very hard to schedule it in a way that's a true surprise, both to the competitors, but the challenger but also like the fans. Because if you watch a title match, let's say, and it's an hour and a half longer than it's supposed to be, like you
Yeah.
get a little tipped off in a way. So like, I think there it would like, and by doing it in advance, you get the hype it up in a way and have fan discussion in a way that isn't as much of a surprise because we talk about some of the stuff we dislike in the final season of the Schmoedown, and one of the
Mhm.
things we most dislike was the fact that we never knew what the next batch would be next week. It was always kind of a surprise or like, see, tune in next time. And
Yeah.
because of that, we couldn't get like excited previews or like a certain level of hype for some of the matches because it was always a surprise. So I think it would have been nice to see it once in a while, but like definitely
Mhm.
not a consistent thing because I think that would be too difficult to implement and also like it would make it feel less special in a way.
True, true. I think we can both agree on the fact that we thank God that Levine won this free for all and not Tom Dagnino as Finstock because that would have been insane.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the second free for all. Oh,
Hmm.
before we actually move on, let's just quickly shout out some top performers from that first free for all.
Okay.
Dan Murrell lasted the longest with 12 rounds and 47 points, which is very incredible given that the second highest points is 28.
Yeah.
So he had a very dominant free for all.
Hmm.
Second is John Humphrey, 11 rounds, 28 points. And
Great
then
showing from John.
especially because of the two people he basically placed ahead of, which is Roca, eight rounds, 28 points, and
Hmm.
Bibiani, which and we're going to talk a lot about Bibiani in this episode, trust
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
But he lasted in the first free for all 6 rounds, 24 points. Like there's very few free for alls that Bibiani doesn't like last long. We will say.
William Bibiani, the king of the free for all, even if he never won one.
Absolutely. So let's go on the free for all two. So free for all two, one of my biggest memories from it was there was this one seat, if you remember, like the first seat,
Hmm.
the entire free for all was occupied by three people, and that's because
Yeah.
those three people had all really good runs, and that's Sean Gerber, Drew
Hmm.
McWeeny, and Ethan Irwin,
Yeah.
which is very hard to do. Like when in the free for all, you have these five seats. There's a lot of turnover, and usually it's a lot of turnover in each seat. Where it's like even if there's a good run around number two, number two gets thrown out, and then a bunch of number twos get thrown out, or something like that. The fact
Yeah.
that only three people was in SC1 was a very memorable moment from the second free for all.
Absolutely, because with the way the free for all works, there's the round of 5 questions, and then at the end of the 5 questions, the person in that seat might have just sat down for that round and they could be eliminated. So, there could have been a lot of turnover in a lot of these seats, but for only 3 people to occupy seat 1 in the course of the entire free for all is impressive.
Absolutely, let's go over the top performers in the second free for all. First off, William Bibiani, 21 rounds, 86 points.
That's
Like
insane.
the fact that this isn't even his best free for all is
I
insane.
know. I know.
We're gonna spend a lot of this episode gushing over Bibbs, and we'll probably give him his own moment in the next free for all. But
Yeah.
like, absolutely insane. Next up, Ethan Irwin, 15 rounds, 56 points. Drew McWeeny, 11 rounds, 42 points, and Lon Harris, 11 rounds, 41 points.
Great showing from Lon in this free for all too. McQueenie and Ethan, you sort of expect that from, but I think a lot of people, because of Lon's character towards the end of the Schmoedown, being the delinquent and the guy that doesn't remember everything, I think a lot of people forget just how knowledgeable Lon is as as a competitor, and a great showing from him in this free for all.
Absolutely. I always feel like even if he didn't always have the greatest performances, I felt like the table always like stiffened up when he walked in. It's
Yeah.
like you could just see the other competitors be like, "Oh, okay, another big shot coming in."
Mm-hmm.
But none of those names actually do win it. Brianne Chandler wins it, partially because of getting a later number, but she also lasted a decent amount of rounds. If I remember, it was 6 rounds, around 6 rounds,
Mm-hmm.
and she wins it by defeating Ethan Irwin, Wendy Lee, Greg Alba, and William Bibiani.
Yeah, this was a change to how you win the free for all. At the end of this one, was whoever won the round once the last 5 competitors were there, instead of it whittling down to one, 2 final competitors going head to head. But I liked this, and I love that Brienne won this. She looked so shocked when she won, and she had just Brienne is a very underrated competitor. I think a lot of people don't rate her very highly for some reason. We did an entire episode on Brienne, so go ahead and check that out by clicking the link in the playlist that's in the description below. But I think it was great that Brienne won this. I believe until Marisol won the final free for all, she was the only woman to win a free for all, and she used her free for all challenge in an interesting way, I think.
Definitely a very interesting way to say the least. I think it makes me think about we've spent a lot of time on this podcast going over the second head versus Shire Wolves, the
Yeah.
missed potential, the fact that it was maybe one of the biggest blowouts of Schmoedown history. Um, instead of spending the moment doing the same points on that, I like to think that like the other people who might have won this free for all probably would have used a free for all shot in the same way. If Ethan Irwin was in that final table, if Ethan Irwin used that won the free for all, given how good he was that season and how good he was early on, I
Mhm.
think we would be talking about Ethan Irwin as one of the greatest of all time. I think he'd be up there with Dan Murrell and Sam Levine. I truly do.
Do you think he would have used it for tag belts as
Yes.
opposed to the singles belt?
I think so, just because of how good he was in singles, and the fact that like I think like when I think about the what ifs of the Schmoedown, I think like that it it wouldn't be like some things would be drastically different, but some I think a lot
Mhm.
of things would normally if you change one thing, things will rhyme, but it won't be the exact same or super different. I think the Shire Wolves would have in high likelihood, because of the way Sam retired and they
Mhm.
were looking for another challenger. I think whoever wins the free for all most likely uses it in teams, especially with the fact it would be one thing uh, if um uh, if Brienne was a part of a team and she and Stacey Howard used it to
Yeah.
a known team. But the fact that Christian allowed, but also the fact that it was Brianne Chandler and someone we've never seen before makes me think that, like, I think whether it was Irwin or Bibby, I think Bibiani would have definitely used it in teams,
Oh
100%.
yeah, Bibiani would have used it in teams, and get him and Whitney a title shot for sure. And
100%.
like Ethan could have used it. I believe this is around the time that Ethan was teaming with Janine as
Yeah.
Time Machine.
It
So
around there. So I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah.
Um it I think this was right before the knockout tournament. So like what probably would have happened is Ethan uses the title shot, and if he loses, he's in the tournament. Or they
Well,
do the
this was right before Anarchy,
it
wasn't
was
it?
right before Anarchy. So what they would have done is either Ethan uses it, and if he wins, he's a champion, and if he loses, what I think Christian would do is either have Ethan be in the tournament with his team partner, or he would there's three scenarios. He would either do that,
Mm-hmm.
or he would break up. Let's say Ethan and Janine team up and fight the Shire Wolves for a championship match, which, by the way, would be a really, really good championship match.
Mm-hmm.
um if they lose, what Christian might have done is say, okay, now Ethan and Janine break up and are with completely different partners. So if like maybe would have been something like, you know how we got Rachel and Guy as a possible team if if
If the
the Shire
Shirewolves
Wolves
hadn't
lost.
won. Yeah.
What they might have done is like, okay, it's if the Shire Wolves lose, then Rachel and Guy. If the Shire Wolves win, then it'll be Irwin and Guy, and then we switch Clark and Janine, basically, something like that. Like
Um yeah, maybe. I mean,
maybe
before the let's be clear, before the team title match between the Shirewolves and Sick in the Head, they'd already done the draw for the Anarchy tournament.
yeah, but there were certain matchups that were dependent on the Shire Wolves outcome
Right.
first.
They were. Like it was going to be Drew McWeeny and Clark Wolf. It was going to be Rachel Cushing and Andrew Guy. Ethan Irwin was supposed to be paired with Janine, but they switched partners.
Yeah,
So he ended up being paired with Sabina Graves. I think it's entirely possible that you could have had Ethan and Janine just stay a pair and then replace them with a different pairing in the tournament.
I could totally see that. I think it would be a very interesting what if.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm very glad Brienne won, because that was a huge thing for her legacy.
It was absolutely.
The fact that she never won a title, and that her record doesn't really show how good she was. The fact that she has
Mm-hmm.
that free for all, and there are very, very few people who have won a free for all. In fact, that she's able to stand proudly as one of them is really important and nice.
Yeah, and she was the first woman to win something major, really, like the free for all or a big title match or anything. So we hadn't had a female champion at that point. So Brienne walking around with that free for all belt that she made for herself was pretty cool to see for a little while. So even if I think that the cash in against the Shire Wolves was completely contrived to get there to be a female champion in the Schmoedown, I'm glad that Brienne won the free for all.
Absolutely. And going down to free for all, the third free for all, my personal favorite free for all, we have
Mm-hmm.
one of the most historic performances, with William Bibiani going from round one to the end, the finals, which, by the
Yeah.
way, a very underrated, very good sudden death between him, JT, and Dan Merle.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we have Brendan Meyer, who, as we stated earlier, coming into this match 0-1 in singles, going
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. I have it right here: 12 rounds and 38 points.
Very
And
impressive for a first free for all.
absolutely, and for basically a second time in the Schmoedown ever.
And
So
this was the live free for all at
it
the
was
theater.
it
So
was the
to do
first
that,
live free for all.
yeah, so to do it in front of a crowd too is very impressive.
Absolutely. So I think, like, and also that we're going to get into this, but like this also free for all created Shazam, one of the greatest teams of all time.
Yes.
So This free for all is definitely the most impactful. It's my personal favorite. Going over the
Agreed.
top performers, William Bibbiani, 30 rounds, 106 points.
Bibbs was so good in this free for all. I was gutted that he didn't win.
I think we all were. It was like all like even though I'm a huge Dan Murrell fan, and spoiler alert, Dan Murrell does win this free for all, which partially why also is part of my favorite. Why it's part of my favorite.
Mhm.
I do think we all were like, man, if anyone deserves it, it's Bibbs. And like, if you look at like who is the greatest free for all player of all time, I think like even despite not winning one, and maybe some people will argue with this, I think it's Bibbs hands down. We can't have a free for all discussion without talking about William Bibbiani. The fact he
Yeah.
was so good, he was so incredible each time he went out there, and the fact that he did this historic thing. I think lasting the 30 rounds, 106 thing will not only remembered more than the actual free for all winners, but I think is in a more impressive accomplishment.
Yeah. By this point, I think Bibbs was doing the standing up thing too instead of sitting down. So I think he did the 30 rounds from round 1 till the end standing, which is also impressive to me because, that was a long free for all.
Absolutely. So going into the other top performers quickly, Merle, who ends up winning it, goes 13 rounds, 42 points. Very impressive.
That's insane. Bibbs got 64 more points than Dan. Murrell. That's just insane to think about.
Free for all is the only Schmoedown event where you can outscore your opponent by 60 and still lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Schneider has a very good one, 11 rounds, 33 points, and JTE almost wins it, if I
He
remember
does.
correctly, 10 rounds, 28 points.
Yeah, the sudden death final was between Dan, JTE, and Bibbs. I wanted Bibbs to win so badly.
I
I was
know.
at this point where I was like, I Merle wins so much. He just wins so much. I was sick of Dan winning at this point in the Schmoedown. And I wanted someone else to win. I wanted it to be Bibbs. It was Dan. I'm glad in the end that it was Dan because of how he ends up using his title shot. But yeah, I wanted Bibbs to win one of these so badly.
Absolutely, especially given where they were in their retrospective careers. Bibiani was, if I remember correctly, was not a singles champion yet.
I
Um,
think he was, but he'd
oh, he
lost
was?
it immediately.
Okay, I couldn't remember if no, you're right, you're right. I'm getting him mixed up because I remember he became a singles champion from. By the way, we didn't talk about this in Free for All 2. He wins MVP, which gets you a number one contenders match. Bibiani uses that number one contenders match to eventually win the singles title against Mark and Draco. Because Sam Levine retired.
Yeah.
Um, but I think Dan Murrell. We talk about Dan Murrell as one of the possible goats of the Schmoedown, and I think a lot of this has to do with this free for all. Because if you look
Yeah.
at the impact of this free for all, first off, being one of the few people to ever win a free for all puts you up there. Secondly, he uses this free for all to win the team's belt against with the founding fathers against corruption. Now, the founding
Mhm.
fathers were not in a good spot when Dan used the free for all
No.
shot. Um, um, the what's it called? They just lost to corruption again. Corruption was their Achilles heel. Corruption goes on to win the championships, and at this
Mhm.
point, it looks like the founding fathers might retire. And this ends up being the free for all shot ends up being a retirement match where if founding fathers lose, they retire. So um, what the fact that he was able to turn that founding fathers into maybe one of the most disappointing teams of all time, one of the super teams we thought would be dominant and be never become a champion, into one of the greatest teams of all time is so important for Dan's legacy when you talk about it, goat argument.
Yeah, absolutely. The founding fathers had lost in the second round of the Anarchy tournament to corruption. That was the famous David O. Russell final question incident, where the answer is David O. Period Russell, and Chance got the point for saying David O. apostrophe Russell. for being phonetically correct. I don't think that should have been given as a correct answer for chance. I mean, I'm a grammar nerd. Like, you got to get the grammar right, in my opinion. So Merle and Roka were out of that tournament, and everybody was like, "Are they going to stay together? What's going to happen?" And then they got the free for all shot, and I remember thinking, I wonder if if they're going to use that shot as a team, because like Dan doesn't really need that to go after the singles belt. Dan can, turn it on basically and go after the singles belt anytime he wants. And so when they went after the the team belts in that video that Dan recorded and was just like, "Oh, we're gonna do this," I think was a great choice. And they, got those belts from corruption, and it started out a pretty good feud between, or continued a pretty good feud between corruption and founding fathers.
Absolutely, and the fact that the founding fathers also defend against Shazam, a
Mm-hmm.
team that was built from this free for all, and honestly is maybe one of the most when you talk about legacy defenses, I think we talk about both the founding fathers, Dan Merle and Roca, very differently if they don't defend against Shazam. And I think we talk about the kid Bibiani very differently if they are able to beat the founding fathers in that moment. I think that this free for all is clearly one of the most legacy defining like historic events within the Schmoedown. It's also, in my opinion, one of the best. There's so many memorable moments. The fact that Bibbs stands the entire time and you're rooting for him the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
The sudden death was absolutely incredible between JT Merle and Bibiani. And I can't even imagine the what if happens if JTE wins the free for all or if Bibiani wins the free for all and the dominoes that come from it. I'll also quickly say it's very funny how this free for all continues to impact in ways. Bibiani wins the MVP here again. That gives him the number one contender match, and with that, he uses it so the kid can get a number one contender match against him and also Dan Merle. All three of which, by the way, almost like a repeat of the best performers of the free for all in a number one contender
Mm-hmm.
match.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the live event in New York at the start of 2020. Absolutely spectacular match between Bibbs, the kid, and Dan Merle. You really could tell at that point that Bibbs really liked Brendan Meyer a lot. And we didn't really know how Brendan would necessarily perform in a situation like that on his own. But the free for all had given us a preview of his knowledge, and he was fantastic. And Merle won that match, though, and went on to take the belt from Ben Bateman at the Atlanta live event. So,
Absolutely. I mean, Dan Merle has been it's funny like how I think we don't think about Bibbs and Dan Merle as like a rivalry, but like when it comes to that number one contender match and also the free for all, it's
hmm,
huge turning points in both in Bibiani's career in a way. Like that's the
yeah,
difference between him being a solidified top 10 top 5 player versus
hmm,
maybe on the outside edge or just in there type of thing.
hmm, absolutely. So in 2020, obviously, we had the pandemic hit, and changed the way that the Schmoedown was going. And we had a different sort of free for all in 2020 because the free for all we were supposed to have got canceled because of the pandemic. So we had a horror free for all digitally, which they figured out how to do. And it was part of the Skybound Halloween Expo. And I watched this free for all, but I don't remember a ton about it. I know Adam Collins won.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's about it. I remember Mark Hoik being like at a Starbucks, like just answering questions on at the Starbucks. I don't know much else about this free for all. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, we talk about the digital age, and first off, what's very funny is I remember very specifically that the free for all was going to take place and was going to be live, and then COVID
Mhm.
hit like 3 or 4 days before, and they had to cancel it. Like
Yeah.
really heading away. I know COVID was bubbling before, but everything got canceled and got
Yeah, all the
digital.
cancellations and stuff happened like 3 days before the free for all was supposed to happen.
Absolutely. So, with that, I'll be honest, like I defend the digital age a lot, and there's a lot I like about the digital age. Free for all didn't translate as well, at least this one. I don't
No,
really care about horror movies. Like you couldn't have chose a genre I know least about, or that I'm less invested in than horror.
same, same.
So I mean, I couldn't remember. I mean, I couldn't remember much. Other than Adam Collins won it, and I had to even look that up to be honest. I didn't even
Yeah.
remember that.
Let's see. It looks like Adam Collins had the 11 rounds, 52 points. Mark Hoyk had a good showing, 7 rounds, 31 points. Let's see who was the next highest. Whitney Seibold, 7 rounds, 22 points. But yeah, I don't really remember much about this. I don't even know if it's up on the Schmoedown Archives channel to watch. I know it was part of the Skybound Expo, so we all had to watch it on Skybound's channel, I think. I don't think it was even on the Schmoedown channel.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just it I'm glad they figured out how to do one, but I because that meant that we also got the next free for all the following season, but I don't think that we really have too much else to talk about this one.
Absolutely. So let's go to free for all five. I remember about the next free for all. There's a lot more IG players in this one.
Mhm.
Um, I re- I remember Saul competing in this one. Um, um, I, I, the Barbarian competes in this one. Uh, I,
Yes.
I I'm trying. I'm blanking on the other ones, but there were a good amount. The top performers: Ben Bateman, 14 rounds, 56 points; Bibiani, 10 rounds, 42 points; and Paul Oyama, 9 rounds, 41 points.
Yeah.
All very good showings.
Mhm.
Oyama ends up beating Bateman in the finals, and I believe Oyama uses his free for all challenge to challenge Sam Levine for the singles title.
Yes, I believe that happened right before the free for all the following year, and because he was holding on to this free for all shot, and nobody knew when he was going to use it, and I believe they waited until literally like right before the free for all the following year for him to use it. Let's see, I'm looking at the list of people that were in the free for all. Saul came in at number 2. Robert Parker was in it.
That's the name I
Um,
was forgetting.
yeah, Jesse Swift was in this. Lots of the players that came in new for this season. um, I believe this was the only appearance in the Schmoedown by Kim Taylor Foster. She
Hmm.
was part of the Finstock Exchange. Um, yeah, and of
It's
course
interesting.
the final competitor of this one was the Flirt and Flouse, and that's when I almost turned it off.
I,
Not gonna
I
lie.
I think the world, and that we didn't have a world where it's a Fleur and Flask win, both for my sanity and especially your sanity, Adelia. I think that would have been. I think that might have been enough for you to maybe quit the Schmoedown and so Fleur and Flask win the free for all.
I mean, it was bad enough they made him the FCL champion. I didn't need him the free for all champion too.
Absolutely, it would have left a sour taste in our mouths
Yeah,
about
Alex
that.
Damon. Alex Damon was also in this.
I will say what's very interesting is like a lot of the factions spent theirs because I think each faction had to use only a certain amount of slots for their
Yeah,
free. Um,
yeah.
and I think what a lot of them used is they used it on lesser known. They either used it on the favorites, like the players that obviously have a chance at winning, but also some of
Mhm.
the lesser known players to try and get their name out there. Because as we've seen, as big example being Brendan the Kinmeyer, you have a really good free for all performance that can give you the tool set or at least the starting point to possibly
Mhm.
become a Schmoedown star in a way and be a you make a name for yourself in the free for all, then that's a huge step up. And by putting these newer competitors in that environment, if you're able to turn like a low round pick that people don't know into someone who performs well into the free for all and people that are someone that is people are actually excited about and like are know and now know in their heads and are looking forward to,
Mhm.
that's just a huge advantage to your faction and the investment you made on that player. So I think that's part of the reason we had so many art IG players, but also just so many players that are on the newer side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it too was scheduling. Like the
Yes.
digital era, like this was still pandemic. Um there were 5 players from each faction to make it even at 40, and then they threw the flirt and flouse in there for some reason. I still don't understand. But
I,
uh,
maybe one point I'll be able to get Adelia to say something nice about Florida Flask. We'll
I will
see.
say all the nice things about Brett Sheridan. I will say nothing nice about the flirt and flouse. I cannot stand that caricature of a character. I'm
All right,
sorry.
moving on to the last free for all. Marisol McKee wins against Paul Preston. We go over the top performers. We have Dan Merle, 10 rounds, 41 points. You notice a lot of the top performers are the same types of people. Also the
Mhm.
people with experience, because it's like they know what it takes and like the mental mindset you have to put in, but you also have to have so much knowledge and also a good amount of luck. And I love Dan Merle. He has had a good amount of luck in his career. Ben
Yeah.
Bateman, also very good performance, 8 rounds, 30 points. Paul Preston, 7 rounds, 25. Travis Fishburne, 6 rounds, 26. And Amaru Moses, 6 rounds, 23 points. Good for Amaru, honestly.
Very good for Amaru.
Very good showing.
Um, we had a complete table elimination in this one too, from David Jindoyan. He knocked out Sam Levine, William Bibiani, Paul Oyama, and the database, I believe. I might be wrong about that. But this one was fun because it was in person again. And like there was lots of good surprise entrance, I thought, in terms of where they entered this. Um, we had lots of people in here. Shannon Barney was in here at one point, which was cool to see Shannon actually get to come in and answer some questions because we know her as the greatest manager of all time.
Listen, if
Uh,
Dagnino can get in a free for all slot, Shannon
yeah,
Barney can get a free for all
yeah,
shot.
uh,
The only thing I wish is she was 50. Honestly, if you give Dagnino that one, But
yeah.
yeah,
There were 40 competitors in this one. We saw the return of Video Drew in this one. She hadn't competed for a while, since the beginning of season 9. Kaiser was in this one. Just like a lot of really cool people. Travis Fishburne got to come in as the FCL champion and compete, which I believe was the last time we ever really saw the FCL championship. Um,
I mean, we see Fishburne as one of the last Schmoedown matches, believe, with a team match against Chance, with Chance. I
that
can't for the life
maybe,
of me, I
maybe.
can't for the life of me tell me who he was up against, but I remember that at least.
Let's see. I will look it up right now.
Yeah, while you look
Um,
it up, I'll also quickly say I think one of my biggest memories from this is like there was a moment where Marisol McKee I think comes in at 36 out of 40, and I was just like, oh, okay. So like when you have a competitor like that, like
mhm.
come in so late, she becomes a huge favorite. Like say like it's
Yeah.
like I think like um, I don't know my opinion on this. Like if you do the free, I think you should. Or actually, I do know. I think the free for all shouldn't be completely random. I think you should mostly space out all the knowledgeable and the players who have already won a lot. Have some of the more surprise names, maybe one, but like it's
I think it should be completely random. I
okay.
mean, if you start doing that, you start like picking who you want to win the most and putting them at the bottom. And like, I understand that like there was a lot of kayfabe and storylines and stuff in the Schmoedown, but the thing that was always great about it was that the matches were 100% real. Like
Okay.
it's not like wrestling where they already go out there knowing who's going to win the match and what moves they're going to do in what order and things like that. So I really like the fact that the Schmoedown was up to whoever answered the most questions, and so I think that the Schmoedown free for all entrants should always have been completely random. Were they? I don't know, but they should have been.
That's fair. The way I view it is like I will always default to like where if you can make something more entertaining without the audience feeling like they've been cheated in a way. I'm not saying you ever say that it's not completely random, but what I would probably do is make it like 75% random.
Yeah,
But like in the moment where it's like if I make it 75% random, but like something would be just clearly so not unfair, but just unfun, or like, oh, could kind of be, or maybe a little unfair, I just make a slight change in a way. Like, and Marisol coming in so late, she's such a great competitor. She's so dominant. I felt
Mhm.
like it's just such a huge, ginormous advantage for her to come in at 36 or 37. That's kind of how I started thinking about that. However, this is one of those debates where it's like, if you say it's completely random, you I'm not going to argue against you, because I think it's just more of a difference of perspective, and also I think it's okay no matter what. I don't think there's a wrong argument as long as you're not making it unfair. Unrandom, if that makes sense, where you're trying to push a certain player. I would
Yeah.
I would make it not random, not to make it unfair, but to make it more entertaining and avoid someone having a clear, obvious advantage.
Okay. I see your point. I still want it to be random, but
That's
I see
fair.
your
That's
point.
fair.
I looked it up. Travis Fishburne was in a team with Chance called Easy Street. Did not remember that team name. And they took on No Vacancy, which was Paige Betty and Eric Zipper, and won by TKO. That was the last time we saw the FCL championship.
Absolutely. And I don't think Marisol uses the doesn't have a chance to use the free for all win because the Schmoedown ended.
Right.
Yes.
Um, I I don't even remember. I don't think she got a title shot. I think it was a number one contendership match, and that was supposed to be against Bateman.
Well,
Because
no, there's no way they didn't give up a title shot, though. I think she just earned a number one contender match.
right, I'm saying I don't think that the free for all this year
Yes.
was for a title shot. I think it was for a number one contendership match, and I think that was supposed to be against Bateman, and then we never got that match.
No problem. So, but I think that's a good place to wrap up this episode,
Yeah.
Delia. Any final thoughts on the free for all and the history of it and everything?
One of my favorite events in the Schmoedown. I do miss it a lot. Every time it's April, like it is right now, it's kind of like, oh man, it would have been free for all time. But great,
Honestly, I wish they just bring it back. Like, you don't have to
yeah,
bring the Schmoedown back. Just bring the free for all back.
bring the
Just
free for
one
all
once a
back. Yeah,
year to celebrate the Schmoedown. Just get all the Schmoedown competitors and have a free for all.
that'd be fun. But what about you, Josh? Any final thoughts?
Um, Not a lot. I think we said a lot this episode. This was a longer one, but there was so
Yeah,
much to cover and so much history within the free for all, and truly one of the like honestly is one of the I look forward to it the same way I look forward to tournament season and spectacular and collision, and honestly probably more that I look forward to it more than most of the Schmoedown events. So like
yeah,
I truly is such a great event, and like it was truly well structured. I'm glad it was only once a year and it was so impactful and so important. And because it was so impactful and important, and you could see that impact and import and how it had an effect on the remaining of the season by giving someone a free title shot. It's just so yeah. I can't say enough good things about it.
absolutely. So thanks for joining me, Josh. Where can people find you?
They can find me here on LGR. I'm usually on the Schmoedown, the Nostalgia Crackdown. I will be any way you support LGR is supporting me. So I really appreciate you. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know your thoughts about the free for all. Any future episodes you like us to do in the Schmoedown in general, or anything. Just like, comment, and subscribe.
Absolutely. And if you want to help support the channel a little bit financially, you can do so at ko-fi.com/LGR_network. That would help us out immensely with getting stuff, really cool stuff done for the channel. You can leave us a comment, like Josh said, and we'll be back next month with a special episode with Nerd Chronic as our special guest. We will be back. Until next time, though, we're out of here. Bye.
It's for real. Real.